Welcome to Not Parenting. This is Carrie. Let's get untangling.
So, Carrie, as we were speaking about being more resourced and being more steadied in the last episode, one of the things that really comes up for me is that a thing that throws me off is fear. There's anxiety about getting it right. Am I doing enough? The constantly comparing to other families. It's almost like an extra being that's part of this sort of family dynamic. Why do you think parenting feels so intense? Like it feels like there's so much pressure that we get it right, that the stakes feel so high.
Yeah, I think about this all the time. And, as I'm listening to you and really tuning in to like a deeper, because this question is not light, it's big. And, the word that comes is love. It's like the love for these humans is so deep and it's so profound and it's so, you knew them from the time they were these tiny, helpless little creatures. And the desire, and that's not even a good word, that's like a drop in the ocean of what I mean by, but it's like the instinct for them not just to survive, but to thrive. And the feeling that when we operate from I'm the parent, and somehow I feel like it's my job, it's my reason for living to help this person have a good experience here. The other side of that is fear. It's so easy. So there's the, oh my gosh, I love them and I'm excited for them to have a life. I brought them here, or I'm choosing to be their caregiver in this lifetime. And I'm the one and we're the ones, and it feels so big. And there's that feeling of like that in itself is immense. But then there's this other side of it of like, and I'm not even sure what doing it right is. There's not a handbook for it. It's not a job description. It's a relationship. And it might be so flowing and easy with one, and it might be really crispy and challenging with another, because you're dealing with different people who are hooking different pieces of you that are often, your best stuff and evoking some of your bigger, more shadowy stuff. And so the fear is not just, it makes sense on a individual relational level. Of course, there's just so much love and you want to make sure there's health and goodness going on. But then there's also a lot that gets communicated in the milieu, in the energy of just being alive here and now. I mean, think about it. 100 years ago, there weren't even parenting books. There was no information about this role of parent. It was really do what was done and listen to what the church has to say, or the synagogue, or a religion, and watch what's happening in your community. And that was the difference. We were more in community too. And then all of a sudden we start developing science and psychology and fields of study of, oh, wow, okay, humans are developing. What do they need? Oh, these parents are on the front lines. They're the ones. So, now we have to hold them responsible for how these people are unfolding. And who wouldn't feel fear at times with all of that? The relationship, like passion to help them feel good and be here, and the information that can be accessed and is coming at us that says, well, here's what they need, and they need this, and they need that, and this is what it is. And, don't be this kind of parent, and do be this kind of parent. And, oh, you're not doing that. That's not good. Like the messages start to swirl. And then, as what I think is so fascinating, as one's resources go down, as one gets depleted, those messages get louder, and the guilt and the shame starts to get more, we hear those gremlin voices more. And so from my perspective, the fear is a function of just wanting this to go well, the general tone of what we have access to and how many people are weighing in with their opinions of what is quote unquote right. And then the general sense that most people who are parenting are under-resourced in terms of having the fuel and the community and all of the elements that allow one to be buoyed enough to turn the dial of their focuser to, hey, we're rolling. This is working. Everybody's growing, and I'm not sure how this is going to unfold. And I'm going to have to take a lot of leaps of faith with this. However, I do trust that we're on a path and we're working it through. As soon as we get overdone, that perspective is harder to access. And so the spotlight starts to turn on what's not working. And then the voices inside get louder, and they start, you can really put it to like a fight or flight. A fight in a parent head might not look like they're screaming at everybody around them, but there might be those fears and that anxiety cooking and simmering and having more airtime because there's exhaustion and because there's not enough pausing and not enough space to hear, like, where am I focusing and what do I want to be considering and how do I want to be meeting all this? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think when you use the word simmering, that really resonated with me, because I don't know that we often notice that it's fear. It doesn't maybe even feel like fear, but what I can really relate to is just a consistent low level simmering of anxiety. And it could be around, like, are they eating the right things? How much time are they spending on their devices? I mean, that's a huge one where I think almost universally parents are really uncomfortable with this thing that is now this massive force in our lives that we have to contend with on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis. But it has this sense of like, it's just always there, kind of like a humming in the background. And really pointing to our conversation in the last episode about self-awareness, it really takes something to get clarity, to get real awareness of what is actually going on here. What exactly am I fearing? Being able to put language to it and then actually be able to do something about it, right? Whether it's a conversation or it's a surrendering, all those things. But I really feel like transcending fear and self-awareness, really, they must go hand in hand. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, in a million percent. And one of the analogies or metaphors I like to use, so let me back up, because typically, we all feel fear at times. But what I have come to understand is that there's a resonance in us that really isn't about parenting, that started somewhere else. And it might have started in our own childhood or in another aspect of our life, but there's an emotional signature, let's call it, a resonance. And you can call it fear. And often it's like a little skeleton or a hanger in the closet, and you can put outfits on it. You see what I'm saying? And so maybe you're aware of it as, oh, I'm afraid that something bad will happen to my child, or I'm afraid I'm not parenting well. But if you took your kids out of it and they weren't in the picture, and you look back at your life, oh, maybe it was around friends in high school, or maybe it was around going to sleep at night when you were little, or maybe it was around a parent not, helping you when you were crying and you didn't know if you were going to be okay when you were 2. And so what I love about this idea of not parenting is it's basically shining the light on here and now. Wow, I'm feeling fear. Where does that live in my body? What am I noticing about these thoughts? We have a witness that can notice, and that's where the self-awareness comes in, that we have to cultivate an understanding of, oh, when I'm steady, I notice I feel this way. Oh, as I'm getting more wobbly, the more self-aware you are, the more you're able to catch it before it puts on, the outfit and the coat and the hat and the gloves. And all of a sudden you're in a state of terror about a story that's not even actually happening. When you're really in an emergency, something kicks in that's very different than this low level fear that sort of simmers and sort of pops its head up and taps us on the shoulder. And so that's what I'm saying about why self-awareness is so vital, is because the fear is going to tap us on the shoulder. And what we do with it has everything to do with how resourced we are and how aware we are of basically like what's actually true here and now.
Well, what I think is really important about what you're saying is that in these moments of fear that we have with our kids, whether it's anxiety or any version of stress, we have to acknowledge that there's this interaction that we're having right here in this day and this moment with our child, but we're pulling from our decades of experience and our own childhood. And so the fear, it's not like we can't isolate it specifically to this child, this interaction, this day, this moment. We're predicting machines. Our brains are constantly pulling from all of our experiences and saying, here's how we think this is going to go. Here's how we think you should act. And I know for me, especially raising teenage girls now, a lot of stuff that just wasn't, like I haven't worked through from my teenagehood is totally coming up in my parenting of their teenagehood. It's crazy how much is getting stirred into the soup. If I'm not aware, wouldn't even realize that that's sometimes what's driving me. Not my fear of what could happen to them, but maybe something that had happened to me that I don't want to have be repeated.
Correct. Brilliantly said. Exactly. And so that's why this process of, so first is the self-awareness. Wow, I am scared. Let go of the story. So the thing happens and something physiological goes on in our body, and that has become known to us as fear. And then boom, within a millisecond, the stories start going. The brain starts intervening and saying, I got to fix this, or what's going to happen, and what if this, and all the ways that and it's micro. And most of us do not have an understanding that there was something that got kicked off in here that led to that. We just think that happened. But really, there's this whole other physiological reactivity that has a lot of information in it, because usually if it does get kicked off, whether it's fear or anger or reactivity in a, inappropriate way, there's an old piece of gunk in there. There's a knot, and the knot feels like thousands of things happen all day that you don't react to, but there's these few things that ignite the fire, and all of a sudden you're revving on it. And so being curious about that is step one. And that's separate from what you actually do with the human, with the other person. And you can't always separate them in the moment, but learning how to ask the question, like, why did that get me? Like, what's under that? What's okay? That's the reaction I had. The reality, I can step back and see, oh, this is just a person who's growing, who's having a bad day. But my reaction to that has a root in something else. And so that's what I'm inviting people and coaching them actively to do, is to untangle those knots, especially the knots of fear, because the truth is your people are going to keep unfolding. And yes, there's going to be times where you do need to get extra resources and help them with things when things are really wobbly. However, you doing that from a place of anxiety and upset and fear has a very different impact on them and the relationship than when you've taken a moment and said, wow, this is really hooking me. There's something going on in me. Yes, I'm going to help you, but I'm also going to get some support for what I'm experiencing, because I could see how this could become either a knot I hand to you or something that gets sticky between us.
Love it. Well, so one knot that I really want to make sure that we untangle in this episode is this fear around doing it right. Or said another way, like we're trying to create these exceptional kids. I'm holding up air quotes that no one can see. So let's talk a little bit about like a shift in our thinking around we're creating exceptional kids. We're doing it right. We're nailing parenting, right? What's possible beyond that perspective or that approach?
Yeah, I hear that. And I think that's why I love this double entendre, this metaphor of not parenting, because in a way, I think from the old perspective, there's that idea that you're making them who they are. and that you're exposed to all this, we see out the things we're exposed to are, kids in the Olympics and the kid on the piano at 5 who's doing their virtuosity. And like, there's all of this exceptionalism sort of highlighted in our world. And there's really not, and we're not in community. That's the other thing. But the idea that there's this feeling, I think, that a lot of parents feel, which is, again, it's my job to help you have a great life, right? That I brought you here and I'm an educated person and I'm going to do my best to help you have as many rich experiences as you can have based on what I might be being told from out there of what that means. Music classes at 4 months and, language at 2 and all these things where there's these enrichments and there's these scales and there's all these measures going, oh, they're not speaking yet. Oh, they're not doing that yet. Oh, let's make sure, and who wouldn't, what parent wouldn't take that on themselves to feel like, oh, I better be doing better. I better be doing more. I better make sure I'm checking all the boxes. And yet, to me, what I love about the idea of not parenting is you're partnering with a human who's developing and you do not have a clue what they're going to hook to. If I hadn't been around moms and babies, I don't think I wouldn't be where I am. But I kind of got lucky that the thing that I was interested in, I experienced early on. So I got to dive in. And whether it's art or computers, or, race car driving, there's endless things that they might hook to, but not everybody's here for a big life. Some people are just here to really find themselves and have hobbies that they like and have relationships that feel good. And so make the relationship the priority. That's, I guess, what I want. When you make the relationship with that person, when that's the goal, when that feels like I'm going to make investments in our relationship bank account, I'm going to do what I can to ask this person, like, who are you? What are you here for? What are you about? What do you need from me? Like, not making assumptions that they better run around to every lesson or else I'm failing them, because they may love the lessons and that might be exactly what you need to do, but they may also really not love that. And they may just want to kind of be home and be cozy and figure it out down the road or never. Like, it's let yourself off the hook in a way and go and make it about finding what is enough. I've shared this with communities along the way that I've supported, but I think that's also part of this question that you're asking is, what would be enough? Like, one has to determine for themselves, like, what am I going to do to invest in this experience of family life, of parenting, of partnering with these humans so that I can feel like I'm investing well without any knowing of how it's going to unfold and very little feedback for a very long time of how that investment is really going.
Yeah, what I want to really kind of highlight about what you just said, in particular, let the relationship be the priority, is that it doesn't mean that I don't introduce my kids to gymnastics or put them in any extracurriculars or they don't get piano lessons. It's that I see when I slow down and I pause and I create a level of self-awareness so that I can see when the creating an exceptional kid, when, this idea of like, I just need to make them into something great can run very counter to the relationship. And an example of that is that as Mark and I raised these 2 great girls, we never had them in more than one thing at a time. Because we realized very early on that that would be at the detriment to our family dynamic. And things like having an extracurricular that ran over dinner time. We just didn't do that because that didn't work for us. That would have created stress and dis-ease in our relationship. They didn't do things during the summer because, again, that would have created, and that's just us. That was our discernment once we were able to step back and say, okay, yeah, we want to have great kids that enjoy a lot of different experiences and become, whole human beings. But we also want an easeful life. We want a connected life. And screaming at my kids to get out the door after they've come home from school that now we got to go back out again and we're missing meals and having to go through the McDonald's drive-through because it's upended our life.
Yeah.
To me, it's worth it to take a step back and go, okay, what's driving the bus here? Is it this need to create exceptional kids? Or is it this real deep rooted commitment to an easeful, connected, loving, slow paced, in my case, that's me, family life. And I think it's having the parenting, the connection be the priority, the relationship be the priority that's just everything. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say, and I think we're going to talk more about this in another episode, but it's exactly how you said it. Beautifully, beautifully summed up, because the pace of life and the things that you invest time and energy in and the ways that you're supporting them, that looks different for everybody. Totally. And if somebody is passionate, again, I grew up passionate about something and it happened to be walking next door and hanging out with the neighbors. I got really lucky. It didn't require my parents to be driving and traveling on the weekends. But if that is the thing and you feel like, oh, I want to support you in that, and we're connected around it, that it isn't causing more, the investment is worth it, have at it. Like, I have no prescription of what one's own relationships and families need to look like. I just invite people to get clear on what's motivating it, because sometimes doing more than maybe you want to do is coming from a place of, I don't want to mess this up. And there's other ways to move with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, our next episode is all about that there's no right way. There's just your way. And so I can't wait to connect with you again on that. So it's great. This is great. Great to be with you today.
You too.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Not Parenting. For any resources or offerings we spoke about in the episode, remember you can head to carrieconti.com or you can click on the links in the episode show notes. Thanks for being here.